The Queen's birthday had always been a grand affair. In the empire spanning countless star systems, celebrations were displays of power, wealth, and technological mastery. Nothing was left to chance. Holographic fireworks, crystal chandeliers orbiting in zero gravity, and orchestras that played perfectly synchronized music. The entire royal court, composed of alien dignitaries with polished exoskeletons, glimmering skin, and eyes that could see in multiple spectrums, waited for her to arrive. Their anticipation was mechanical, like a clock winding itself. But humans never fit neatly into such machines of ceremony. The human envoy stepped cautiously through the gleaming halls. He had arrived days earlier, representing the Earth Federation on a diplomatic mission that felt almost insignificant in the eyes of the Empire. He had trained for negotiations, studied alien customs, memorized dozens of protocol rules, and yet, standing before the Queen's throne, he felt more exposed than ever. His uniform, simple, unadorned, earth gray with a bronze insignia, seemed almost comical against the grand robes and luminous armor of the court. He clutched a small, wrapped package in his hands. Nothing about it suggested importance. The court had been filled with exotic gifts, jewels that floated like liquid, weapons that bent the laws of physics, devices that whispered knowledge of distant galaxies. And here was a human, holding a box no bigger than his hand. "Present your gift," the master of ceremonies intoned, his voice like the resonance of a tuning crystal. The human stepped forward, heart hammering. He bowed deeply, a human gesture awkward and imprecise. "Your Majesty," he said, voice steady despite the fear knotting his stomach. "I bring you a token for your birthday, something simple yet meaningful." The wrapping fell away, revealing a mechanical wristwatch, its polished metal gleaming under the artificial lights. Its face was round, glass pristine, hands ticking steadily. Nothing else. No holograms, no alien enhancements, no flashy displays, just a watch. A ripple of confusion passed through the court. Alien diplomats exchanged glances, some whispered in their harsh, clicking tones. One of the younger nobles tilted his head. "Is this a toy?" The moment her fingers touched it, the room froze. Literally. Her eyes widened slightly, her usually unreadable face flickered with emotion, and for the first time in centuries she did not speak. The court shifted uncomfortably. No one knew whether to panic, bow, or stay still. The watch had belonged to her late husband, the legendary emperor who had vanished in a mission beyond known space. The official records claimed his body was lost, destroyed, or irrecoverable. The thought of the watch ever returning seemed impossible, yet here it was resting in her palm. Her mind reeled. Memories flooded back. The first time she had seen him laugh, the night they had watched the stars together, the day he had left for his fateful mission. The mechanical ticking of the watch was faint but perfect, a human craftsmanship she had never fully appreciated until now. It was simple, delicate, and utterly human. Unlike the Empire's tools, which hummed with alien intelligence, this watch spoke silently of a life lived, a man loved, and time measured not in domination but in moments. The human envoy remained motionless, unsure of what would happen next. He had not expected this reaction. He had expected thanks, perhaps confusion, maybe even a mild insult. He had not expected a queen, an immortal ruler of a galactic empire, to freeze as if her entire world had shifted on its axis. One of the older court officials stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty, are you unwell? I only thought it important to bring it to you." The Queen's hands trembled slightly. No one had ever seen her tremble. Even in battles, even during crises, she had been a paragon of composure. Now she was just a widow, a woman touched by memory, by the weight of love and loss. The envoy watched silently, feeling the absurdity of the moment. He was just a man from Earth, small and fragile compared to the towering aliens around him. Yet here his actions, simple, human, respectful, had done what centuries of empire could not. They had pierced the armor of a ruler who ruled by fear, efficiency, and intellect. Finally, the Queen spoke, her voice steadier now but layered with emotion. You brought him back to me. I did not know it belonged to you." She did not see an envoy, an emissary, or a representative. She saw a person who had honored memory, who had traveled where none dared, who had chosen respect over advantage. Slowly, she placed the watch on her wrist. The ticking resumed in her mind, steady, gentle, and eternal. "You have done something no one else could. You have reminded me of him." Her eyes glistened. A collective gasp ran through the court. Some diplomats stepped back, unsure whether to bow or retreat. The master of ceremonies cleared his throat, unsure whether protocol even existed for this. The queen, however, seemed unmoved by such concerns. "What is your name, human?" she asked. "Commander Elias Kane, your majesty," he said, bowing again, deeper this time. "Commander Kane," she said, testing the sound of his name. "You carry the memory of the past into the present. That is rare, that is valuable." The human bowed again, unsure whether to speak. "It is an honor, your majesty. I only did what seemed right." The court whispered, aliens questioning what they had always believed, that humans were weak, unpredictable, and insignificant. And yet here was proof that humans could reach across the galaxy, touch memory, and change hearts without firing a single weapon. Outside, the stars continued to shine, indifferent to the drama unfolding in the palace. Yet inside, history shifted imperceptibly. The smallest human gift had reminded an empire that even the most powerful ruler was still human in her heart, and that humans, small, frail, seemingly ordinary, were capable of acts the empire itself could never conceive. The queen looked down at the watch, the ticking echoing softly in her mind. Commander Kane remained on his knees, tense but steady. No one spoke for several moments, as if the universe itself had paused to witness the unlikely meeting of memory and humanity. Finally, she spoke, her voice carrying authority tempered with wonder. "You have opened a door, Commander Kane, one that even I did not know existed. The past is alive again, and it is because of you." He had crossed forbidden regions, endured dangerous missions, and faced the unknown. But nothing had prepared him for the quiet power of a human act that reminded even an immortal queen of love, loss, and memory. The court waited tense. Would this human be punished, rewarded, ignored? The queen's eyes scanned the assembled dignitaries, the room, the immense palace, and for a fleeting moment, the centuries of empire seemed fragile, as if they could crumble under the weight of a single human gesture. And perhaps they could, because history had always underestimated humans. The palace was quiet after the celebration, but the echoes of the event lingered in every corridor. Even the vast, polished halls seemed smaller now, weighed down by the unseen presence of memory. The queen sat alone in her private chambers, the small human watch resting on her wrist. She turned it over, tracing the familiar lines of the metal casing with a careful finger. It was more than a machine. It was a bridge to someone she had loved and lost, someone whose absence had defined the last century of her reign. Outside her chambers, the court murmured in confusion. Advisors whispered to each other in low tones, speculating about what had just occurred. Some dared to suggest that the queen had been compromised by grief, but others, more cautious, feared that the humans were far more dangerous than they had ever imagined. They had traveled into regions deemed unreachable, recovered an object thought lost forever, and returned it to the empire's most guarded ruler. That alone was enough to inspire awe, suspicion, and fear. Commander Elias Kane, the human envoy, had been escorted to a guest chamber, but even there he could not relax. He paced slowly, mind racing with questions he had not asked and answers he did not yet understand. He had been trained to navigate alien politics, but nothing in his education prepared him for the quiet force of memory, the way a simple object could shift the balance of an empire. A knock came at the door, soft but deliberate. Elias turned, and a palace aide entered, bowing slightly. "Your Majesty requests your presence," the aide said, gesturing toward the queen's chambers. Elias hesitated, but he knew this was more than a formality. He followed, his hands clasped behind his back, mind alert. As he approached, he could feel the subtle tension in the air, as if the very walls of the palace held their breath. The queen was waiting. She did not rise from her seat, but her gaze was intense, focused on the human standing before her. "You did not know," she said softly, "and yet you carried this watch to me. Do you understand what that means?" "I only did what I thought was right, Your Majesty. I found it and brought it here. I did not know its significance. Humanity has done what my empire could not. You take risks that we deem impossible, and yet you do it for memory, for respect, for something that cannot be measured in power or conquest." For a long moment she said nothing, listening only to the faint ticking of the watch on her wrist. It was steady, unwavering, a heartbeat from a distant past. She realized then that humans were different, not stronger, not faster, not more intelligent in the way her advisors valued intelligence, but stronger in a way that mattered most. They carried the past forward. They honored what was lost. "Tell me everything," she said finally, her voice firm. "Tell me how this watch reached you. How did humanity enter the dead zones? How did you preserve it when the empire itself could not?" The region we explored is dangerous, full of spatial anomalies, unstable energy fields, and remnants of ancient civilizations that no one understands. Most species avoid it because the risks are too high. But we went there because we needed to know. When we found the wreckage of your husband's ship, it was barely intact. Many thought all was lost, but we could not ignore it. We recovered the personal items, the records, and yes, the watch. We preserved them as they were without alteration. We could not risk changing history. Those who did understand that what we carried was fragile and precious. The watch was more than metal. It was a symbol of who he was and what he meant, and it mattered to us. She had spent decades mourning, ruling, and learning to mask her grief beneath the armor of leadership. But now, a human had reminded her of what she had almost forgotten, that memory, love, and respect could transcend even death and distance. "You understand more than my court does," she said softly. "You understand the meaning of life in ways my empire has forgotten. Perhaps humanity is not just another species to negotiate with. Perhaps you are something more. That is how we honor those who came before us." That is remarkable. She had seen what humans were capable of, not as soldiers or conquerors, but as beings who valued memory, who understood loss, who honored life. The Queen spoke again, her voice taking on the authority of a ruler, but laced with emotion. "Prepare a full report for me, Commander Kane. I want to know every detail, the route you took, the conditions you faced, the methods you used to preserve the items. The Empire will need to understand humans better if we are to coexist, and perhaps even learn from you. This cannot be ignored. I will provide everything you need." Humans were not empire builders, they were survivors, explorers, and preservers of what mattered. Yet in the Queen's eyes, these qualities were formidable. The palace aide who had escorted him earlier entered the chamber again, bowing. "Your Majesty," the aide said cautiously, "the council awaits your instruction." They wished to discuss the presence of humans within the Empire and the implications of their actions. Humans have reminded us of our own humanity. That is the message they carry, whether they know it or not, and it is a lesson the Empire cannot ignore. He realized that the galaxy had underestimated humans, but now the seed of understanding had been planted. Perhaps one day, the Empire would respect humans not for their fleets or technology, but for what they valued most: memory, courage, and moral integrity. For the rest of the day, the Queen remained in her private chambers, holding the watch, lost in thought. She reviewed the reports brought by Commander Kane, absorbing every detail. Humans had traveled through dangerous regions, faced perils unimaginable, and emerged not as conquerors but as preservers. They had honored life, respected history, and acted with purpose. And in doing so, they had reminded her of love, loss, and the fragile, powerful beauty of memory. Outside the palace, the stars continued their silent rotations. Entire systems moved through space, oblivious to the drama unfolding within one palace hall. Yet inside, history had shifted imperceptibly. The humans had arrived not with weapons or demands, but with conscience and courage, and that had changed everything. The Queen finally spoke, her voice resolute. "Prepare a message for the Council," she said. "Humanity is not to be underestimated. They are not just survivors, they are teachers. Let the Empire learn from them if it can." Yet through the quiet courage of his people, he had opened a door that the most powerful empire in the galaxy had never expected. And as the stars outside the palace shimmered, he realized something profound. Humans had not just returned a watch. They had returned a legacy. The following morning, the Queen summoned Commander Kane to a private conference room overlooking the palace's observation deck. Through the transparent alloy walls, countless stars stretched into infinity, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and the tiny place anyone being occupied within it. Yet within this immensity, humans had ventured where no one else dared, and their courage now demanded attention. "Sit, Commander Kane," the Queen said, motioning toward the seating. Her tone was calm but layered with authority. "I have read your initial reports. They are impressive, but I want the full story. I want to understand how humans recovered what was lost, preserved it, and returned it intact. I want to know the choices your people made along the way. We received information from an exploration probe in a sector known as the Dead Zone. That sector was marked in the Empire's charts as inaccessible and abandoned. No species had dared enter it for centuries. The probe transmitted images of a wreck barely recognizable. It matched the description of a long-lost Imperial vessel commanded by your late husband. Its hull was torn, and its systems were offline, but the records inside suggested some items might have survived. We were prepared for hazards. Gravitational anomalies, energy storms, and unstable fragments of what we now know were relics of an ancient civilization. Most species would have retrieved what they could and returned quickly, leaving damaged sections behind. But we approached it differently. Our first priority was preservation. Every object, every record, every personal item was documented, handled carefully, and stored as we found it. For example, this watch, he gestured to the small wristwatch she now wore. It was delicate. We cleaned it, repaired minor damage, and ensured the original mechanisms were intact. We did not alter it. We did not enhance it. We preserved it as it was, exactly how it existed when last in your husband's possession. No one else would have done this. The Empire, we prioritize efficiency, results, technology. Memory is rarely valued. You value it above all. Your husband's watch, it represents more than time. It represents respect, love, and remembrance. That is why we brought it to you. And yet, through humans, I find him again. Not in life, but in memory. And memory is stronger than any weapon. Yet here they had done what the greatest empire in the galaxy could not. They had preserved the past, honored the fallen, and returned something thought gone forever. That, Kane realized, was true strength. The Queen rose and walked slowly to the observation deck, the watch glinting in the soft light. "Show me your methods," she said. "Not just what you did, but how. I need to know the thinking behind your actions, the risks, the choices, and the consequences." Most species would have sent automated drones, retrieved what they could, and left. We did not. We prepared specialized vessels with redundant shielding, manual override systems, and human crews trained to adapt under extreme conditions. No AI was trusted to make decisions about memory and preservation. Only humans could understand the value of what we found. Humans must decide what matters, and we acted with care and respect. Every item was logged, cleaned, stabilized, and stored. Nothing was discarded without understanding its purpose. The dead zone took lives, yet the survivors understood the importance of what we carried. That is why the watch survived intact. You understand my husband better than I thought anyone could. He was meticulous, personal, yet he was lost to the void. Humans have brought him back to me. That is our purpose. Her words carried centuries of wisdom, judgment, and authority. To be recognized by her was not merely to be respected. It was to have human values acknowledged as a force that could shape the galaxy. The Queen returned to her seat, the watch resting gently on her wrist. "Tell me about the team," she commanded. Who were the humans who risked their lives for this mission? None sought glory, none sought conquest. They had acted purely out of conscience, and that made their success extraordinary. "Your people are remarkable," the Queen said softly. "They are reckless yet wise, bold yet compassionate. They defy the rules of survival not with strength alone, but with ingenuity and heart. Perhaps this is why humans endure." They were not compliments easily earned. They were acknowledgments of a species that others underestimated at every turn, a species whose true strength lay in character, not technology or weapons. The Queen continued, her voice a mixture of authority and quiet emotion. "The Empire has long valued power, efficiency, and control. But humans show me another path. They preserve what is lost. They honor what others forget. They act not for dominance, but for conscience. That is a lesson I will carry forward." Humans had crossed boundaries of danger, morality, and memory, and now they had been recognized not for what they could destroy, but for what they could preserve. The Queen stood again, her eyes fixed on the stars. "I will convene the council soon," she said. "They must understand the implications of humanity's actions. They must see that the human approach, honoring memory, respecting life, risking survival for conscience, is not weakness but strength. And perhaps humanity can teach the Empire to value what it has always neglected. Let the galaxy know that humans act differently, not because they are naive, but because they understand the weight of existence. That is what sets them apart. That is what makes them formidable." Humans, thought insignificant, had crossed deadly space to honor memory, risk life for conscience, and return what was lost. They had demonstrated not just survival, but the power of principle, the courage of empathy, and the strength of moral integrity. The Queen placed her hand over the watch, feeling the gentle tick that marked both time and memory. She knew that this small human object, simple, delicate, unassuming, represented far more than she had ever realized. It represented hope, courage, and the capacity of a species to do what others could not. And for the first time in decades, the Queen allowed herself to imagine a future where humans were not underestimated, where their values reshaped not only interstellar politics but the very essence of civilization. Humanity, she whispered, is more powerful than history gives them credit for. And they have reminded me of what truly matters. The Queen watched him leave, her mind filled with possibilities. Humans had returned what was lost, preserved what mattered, and reminded her of a past she had thought forever gone. And she knew, with a certainty she had not felt in centuries, that humans were destined to leave their mark not just on one planet or system, but on the galaxy itself. The council chamber was enormous, a cathedral of glass and metal that stretched toward the stars. Light from distant suns glinted across polished surfaces, casting long shadows on the assembled dignitaries. They were the rulers, advisors, and generals of the empire, creatures of intellect and authority who measured worth in fleets, planets, and technological power. And yet today they were unsettled. Something as simple as a wristwatch had shifted their focus, something human. The Queen entered the chamber, the watch glinting on her wrist. She did not need to speak at first. Silence held the room in its grip. Even the most outspoken council members faltered, sensing that this meeting would not follow normal protocol. Commander Kane followed behind, standing slightly apart, hands clasped behind his back. Humans were small in stature compared to the aliens surrounding him, but in this room, stature did not matter. His presence alone had already unsettled centuries of convention. "Speak," the Queen said, her voice steady yet commanding. "Explain why this species, humans, has returned what was lost when even my greatest fleets and scholars failed. Your Majesty, with all respect, humans are insignificant. Their fleets are weak. Their technology is primitive compared to ours. Surely this is a minor occurrence, a coincidence. They acted not out of conquest, not for glory, but because it was right. That is strength beyond fleets, beyond weapons, beyond all measures of empire. They could disrupt trade routes, spy on our secrets, even challenge imperial control. That is why they have returned what others would have destroyed. That is why they carry influence invisible yet profound. That is why they are not to be underestimated." One of the generals, his mandibles clicking nervously, finally spoke. "Your Majesty, what if we empower them too much? The Empire's security could be compromised if humans learn our weaknesses. And that is a power your fleets and armies cannot wield. Remember this well. The human strength is not in what they conquer, but in what they preserve and how they honor what is lost." By acting morally in a universe ruled by efficiency and pragmatism, they had challenged centuries of assumption. And now the Empire had no choice but to reckon with it. Commander Kane stepped forward cautiously. "Your Majesty," he said, "if I may speak, humans act because they understand the weight of existence. Every life, every memory, every action matters. That is how we survive. That is why the Watch survived. That is why your husband's legacy was honored. That is why we do not seek glory or advantage. We do what must be done. We act with integrity, we act with memory, and we act even when failure is likely because preserving life and history matters more than victory. That is our measure of strength. It is a measure that your empire can neither replicate nor ignore." The Queen's words had prepared them, but Kane's presence, human courage incarnate, made the lesson undeniable. Finally, the Queen spoke. "The Dead Zone mission has proven something essential. Humans are capable of acts the Empire cannot comprehend, not because they are stronger or faster, but because they act with principle. They preserve what is fragile, respect what is gone, and honor what is remembered. That is the true measure of power. They are dangerous to those who measure strength only in fleets and weapons. But they are not dangerous in the way your fear imagines. They are dangerous because they act from morality, memory, and conscience. That is not weakness. That is a force you cannot contain or command. That is why we must respect them, study them, and understand them. If we underestimate humans, it will be our failure, not theirs. And remind them, this is not an anomaly. Humanity is capable of consistent, principled action, even under the most extreme conditions. A message that humans, small and underestimated, can change the course of events with courage and conscience. Let this council understand that humanity's influence is not measured in armies or fleets, but in principle and integrity. That is their strength, and that is a strength even we must learn from." She studied him, and in her eyes was a rare expression, acknowledgement and respect. "Humans do not seek recognition," she said quietly. "They act because it is right. That is what makes them remarkable. That is what makes them unforgettable." But the human envoy had changed the course of thought in one of the greatest empires of the galaxy. The council would debate, they would argue, and some would resist, but the truth could not be denied. Humans had acted with principle, courage, and respect, and the empire had been forced to acknowledge it. Later, Kane reviewed his notes, the details of the mission clear in his mind. Every decision, every risk, every human choice mattered. The dead zone had been perilous. Many could have died, yet humans had prevailed not through brute force but through ingenuity, care, and moral clarity. They had preserved the past while navigating dangers that no other species dared face. The Queen watched him work and spoke softly. "I want the Empire to see what you have done. Not as a threat, not as a curiosity, but as a lesson. Humanity's strength is not conquest. It is conscience, courage, and the wisdom to honor what is fragile. That lesson is more valuable than any fleet, more powerful than any weapon. And that is why you have earned my respect and the respect of history. Let this council understand it. Let them see that humans are a species unlike any other. Let them see that your actions have shifted the perception of the galaxy." And in this moment they had changed not only the Queen's mind but the future of the Empire itself. As the sun rose over distant stars, the palace hummed with quiet power. The Queen touched the watch once more, feeling the ticking heartbeat of memory, the weight of love, and the force of human principle. "Humans," she whispered, "are more powerful than anyone believed. And they have reminded me what truly matters." And when it did, the galaxy would begin to see the truth, that humans were remarkable not for what they destroyed, but for what they preserved. The Queen turned to Kane one last time. "Prepare your message carefully," she said. "It must convey the depth of human action, the courage required, and the moral clarity displayed. Let the Empire learn, and perhaps learn to respect humanity in ways they never imagined." Outside the palace, the galaxy spun in endless cycles. Systems rose and fell. Empires expanded and contracted. Yet in one palace on one world, a small species had proven something extraordinary. That principle, courage, and conscience were powers that could reshape the minds of rulers, challenge centuries of assumption, and leave a mark far beyond the reach of fleets or weapons. The watch on the Queen's wrist ticked on, a steady reminder of what had been lost, what had been preserved, and what humans, small, fragile, and underestimated, were capable of achieving. And in that quiet moment, history itself seemed to bend, acknowledging the true strength of humanity. The galaxy had not yet realized the full weight of what had happened in the Queen's palace. Reports were circulating through fleets, systems, and planets, carried by messengers, transmissions, and whispers. Commander Kane's account of the Dead Zone mission had reached every council member, every advisor, every general who had once doubted humanity. The Empire had been forced to reconsider everything it thought it knew about the species from Earth. The Queen prepared for a public address, a moment that would change the perception of humans across the galaxy. She chose to speak not from a throne of gold and technology, but from the observation deck, facing the stars with the watch on her wrist. It ticked softly, a reminder of a life lost, a legacy preserved, and the courage of humans who had returned it. Her voice, carried through every communication channel, was calm, commanding, and filled with conviction. "I speak today not only as the ruler of this empire, but as someone who has witnessed an extraordinary act. Humanity has proven that true power is not measured in fleets, planets, or weapons. True power is measured by courage, conscience, and respect for life and memory." The Queen continued, "A human named Commander Elias Kane and the people he represents ventured into regions of space long considered dead and impossible to navigate. They recovered a ship lost to time, preserved its contents, and returned what was thought gone forever, the personal effects of my late husband, a ruler lost to history. Among these items was a simple wristwatch. A small object, yet one that carries memory, love, and life itself. They acted not for power, not for conquest, but because it was right. They preserved what was fragile, honored what was lost, and reminded us that memory and conscience are forces as strong as any fleet, as decisive as any weapon. Humanity has shown the galaxy a new measure of strength, one that relies not on domination, but on principle." It was a lesson that could not be ignored. The Queen paused, letting the weight of her words sink in. Then she looked down at the watch and whispered softly, almost to herself, You have reminded me of what matters. You have returned not only a relic, but a piece of life itself. In her mind, the human act of conscience, courage, and preservation had restored something that no amount of power could replace: memory, love, and respect. The queen turned back to her audience. Therefore, I decree that humans shall be recognized not for their fleets, not for their technology, but for their principles. Let the galaxy know that a species capable of honoring life and memory is a species whose influence cannot be ignored. Let this be a lesson to all who measure strength by mere force. True strength lies in conscience and courage. And it was not vanity or pride that drove this acknowledgement. It was the undeniable truth of what humans had accomplished. In the days that followed, the Empire began to adjust. Reports of humans traveling into forbidden regions, preserving history, and acting with unwavering conscience were circulated, analyzed, and debated. Scientists, historians, and diplomats studied the methods humans had used in the dead zone, seeking to understand not just the technology, but the mindset. What allowed humans to risk life and vessel for memory? What drove them to act when failure was probable and danger extreme? The answer was clear. Humans acted because it was right. Their choices were guided by principle, not by ambition or greed. They measured success not by conquest, but by preservation, not by victory, but by integrity. And that, the Empire slowly realized, was a power they could not match. The Queen summoned Kane once more to her chambers. She was calm, serene, and yet her presence carried the weight of centuries. You have changed the way I see the galaxy, Commander Kane. You and your people have reminded me that even the smallest gesture, a watch, a token, an act of respect, can reshape history. That is the essence of humanity. That is how we honor those who came before us. She traced the watch with her finger, feeling its subtle ticking. It was more than metal. It was a connection to the past, a testament to human courage, and a reminder that memory could outlast empires. She thought of her late husband, of the life he had led, and of the humans who had preserved his legacy when all others had forgotten. Outside the palace, the stars stretched infinitely. Fleets of the Empire, previously dismissive of humanity, now studied Earth's transmissions with new respect. Scholars wrote papers on human psychology, morality, and decision-making. Diplomats reconsidered alliances, realizing that humans were not predictable, not controllable, and therefore far more powerful than previously acknowledged. Kane observed this quietly, aware of the impact humans had made. It was not through war, conquest, or technological superiority. It was through principle, courage, and respect for life and memory. Humanity had challenged centuries of assumption, reshaped an empire's thinking, and established a new standard for strength. The Queen called a ceremonial event to honor humanity's contribution. It was not a display of power or conquest, but of recognition and respect. Kane, his crew, and representatives of humanity attended. The Queen placed the watch at the center of the ceremony, a symbol of memory, courage, and the moral integrity that defined humans. She addressed the assembly. Let this watch serve as a reminder: the greatest power in the galaxy is not domination, but conscience. The smallest species can shift the course of history when guided by principle. Humans have proven that courage, respect, and the preservation of life are forces stronger than fleets and weapons. Let all who hear these words remember it. They were recognized as a species whose values, choices, and actions could shape the galaxy itself, and the watch, small and unassuming, remained a quiet testament to their enduring influence. Later, Kane walked with the Queen through the observation deck, the stars reflecting in her eyes. "You have honored humanity, Your Majesty," he said, "but we do not act for recognition. We act because it is right. Then let us hope we continue to do what is right, no matter the cost. And it is a gift no empire can ignore." The Queen placed a hand on Kane's shoulder. "Go, Commander, continue your work, continue to act with conscience. Continue to remind the galaxy that true strength is not measured by fleets or weapons, but by courage, respect, and memory. Humanity has done enough to teach the Empire a lesson it will never forget." The Dead Zone mission had not only returned a relic, it had returned hope, reminded the Queen of love, and established humanity as a species whose moral courage could stand alongside any empire in the stars. The watch ticked softly on the Queen's wrist, a heartbeat of memory and life. And in that simple rhythm, the galaxy learned a truth it had long overlooked. Humans endure, humans remember, and humans act rightly, even when the odds are impossible. That is the power of humanity. That is the measure of a species that will never be underestimated again. And somewhere in the quiet reaches of space, humanity continued its journey, small but unyielding, carrying memory, courage, and conscience into the infinite, knowing that even the simplest act, a preserved watch, a choice to honor the past, could echo across the stars and change history forever.